Hello, everybody. Welcome to Sew Together Live with Shannon Fabrics. My name is Sheila Ryan, and I'm a Cuddle Ambassador in Texas. I'm actually in deep South Texas. So if you've been watching the news, we are near but not affected directly by the flooding. So keep our friends and neighbors in your thoughts and keep sending your good vibes this way. But I wanted to tell you hello. It is a gorgeous day here in South Texas. And so I am so excited to show you our project today. So as you may have seen, Shannon Fabrics has a fabulous new fabric that they are launching called Quilting Cuddle. And Quilting Cuddle is unlike any fabric you may have ever worked with before. So it's called Quilting Cuddle because you can quilt with it in a way that you may not have been able to with other cuddle fabrics before. Now, we've been using cuddle fabric on quilts, in quilts, with piecing, on the backs, with long arming, with machine embroidery for a long time, and it's fantastic. But Quilting Cuddle is a little bit different. So regular cuddle fabrics come on a large bolt. So they are 58 to 60 inches wide. Quilting Cuddle is like regular quilting fabrics, and it comes on a 45-inch wide bolt. So those short bolts where your cotton fabrics are, your Quilting Cuddle will be the same size bolt. So it's not as wide, but that means that when you're making a quilt pattern, you can use Quilting Cuddle to get your yardage all, you don't have to do any quilt math. Your quilt patterns work with the Quilting Cuddle width that is on the bolt. So that's just one of the benefits of Quilting Cuddle. The other thing about Quilting Cuddle that's a little bit different is that it doesn't have the same kind of stretch that the regular cuddle fabrics have. We're going to talk about that stretch, and we're actually going to use a little bit of that stretch to our advantage in this project. But what I want to show you is that, so quilting regular cuddle does have quite a bit of stretch, but it does snap back. Quilting Cuddle has a little stretch, but it is not dramatic, and it is very, very stable. So the backing is a little bit different. The backing is still super soft. It's very luxurious. We're going to talk about all these things as we go through this project, but Quilting Cuddle is just super fun. I see people checking in, so thank you for checking in and telling us where you're watching from. I see California, Ohio, Vancouver, all over the place. So wonderful. I see some of our Cuddle ambassadors here. Jackie Hillman is managing our comments over on YouTube. So if you're watching over on YouTube, Jackie knows things and is fabulous. I see Teresa Coates here with us. Hello, Teresa. And so please, as we go along, leave your questions, leave your comments in the chat. And I am able to see those questions and comments, and I want to make sure that we get them all answered. So today's project, we're going to be using a pattern that is, it's super fun and super easy. So it's the Drop Zone pattern from By Annie. So this is a darling zipper bag pattern. It comes in 3 sizes. It's fat quarter friendly, which I thought was fun because Quilting Cuddle is also going to come in fat quarters. So how fun is that? And so what we want you to do is we would like you to like and share this video so that you could win a bundle of the Quilting Cuddle fat quarters. I have not seen the fat quarter bundle, but I've heard from people who have seen it and have touched it that it's a gorgeous bundle. So there are several lines of the Quilting Cuddle that you can see over on the Shannon Fabrics website. Now, Shannon Fabrics does not sell direct to consumers. So if you're here watching today and you are a shopper, you can't go to Shannon Fabrics and buy directly, but you can go to your local quilt shop, your independent quilt shop, and you can tell them that you've been watching the Shannon Fabrics videos and that you're interested in the Quilting Cuddle, because there are some fantastic deals on Quilting Cuddle right now. Specifically, Quilting Cuddle comes in collections. That's the other thing that's so fun about it. In the past, Shannon Fabric has released coordinating prints and solids, and so then we play with them and we match them all together. But Quilting Cuddle comes in coordinated collections. So I'll be showing you some of those today in the project that we're working on. But let me show you some of the projects that I've personally been making with Quilting Cuddle already. So this project is the trucker hat pattern by Rose City Originals. He's a quilter in Portland. And so I've been quilting with Quilting Cuddle. I'm not a quilter, but I'm learning. So I've learned some things. So this is a machine embroidery quilting on the Quilting Cuddle. I've got a layer of Soft and Stable from by Annie in between my layers of Quilting Cuddle and then cotton fabric on the back. But I quilted the panel of the trucker cap. Then I did some machine embroidery on it. And so the machine embroidery comes out beautifully on Quilting Cuddle. One of the features of Quilting Cuddle is that the pile length, the length of the fibers that stick up over the surface of the fabric, are only 1.5 millimeters tall. So regular C3 Cuddle that we've been using for stuffies, for quilts, for blankets, all of that, that is 3 millimeters long. C3, that's what we call it, C3, because of the 3 millimeters. So the pile on this fabric is half the height, okay? Luxe Cuddle has a pile from 10 millimeters, which is a centimeter long, all the way up to 40 millimeters, which is 4 centimeters long. So Luxe Cuddle is very fluffy and fun, and there are lots of fibers. Some of them are dense, and some of them are a little more lightweight. But Quilting Cuddle is unlike either of those. It's similar in that it is still a cuddle product. So it has all of the softness and luxuriousness and durability that you've come to expect with the cuddle products, but it's thinner. And because it's thinner and because the base is a little bit more stable, it allows us to do some really neat things. One of the things that you can do with it is you can actually quilt with it. So this is a quilt that I'm working on. And I wanted to show you some places where I'm really proud of, because I'm not a quilter and quilters love their points. And so I have been able to get some very precision intersections with my quilting. And I really, really do love how this comes out. So these are some half square triangles. See that intersection there? I can see my points. I mean, I'm happy when I can see my points on quilting cotton, but I'm thrilled when I can see my points on quilting cotton, or Quilting Cuddle for sure. So because it's not finished, I can show you the back and show you how these seams lie. So Quilting Cuddle presses beautifully. If you're someone that presses, I am not as consistent in pressing as I should be as a quilter, which is why I love using Quilting Cuddle, because it's a polyester fabric and I don't have to press it, because when you seam it, the seams fall open beautifully. Now, we're going to be doing a little bit of that with this project today, but I want to really show you a different way that I've been quilting lately. So I've been playing with the Bernina L890 serger, which I know we typically don't think of sergers as quilting machines, but let me tell you, this is this does some cool stuff. And another thing, I mean, there's so many reasons why I wanted to bring you this project, but one of the things that I wanted to show you is that with the Quilting Cuddle and with your serger that has cover stitch features, you can really do some different kinds of quilting that you may have ever tried before. So this is quilted, this is machine embroidery quilted, but it's still quilting, and you can see that we get the beautiful texture that you come to expect when you're quilting on cuddle fabrics, right? The stitches, the regular running stitches that we use for sewing quilting lines, fall in between the fibers and they leave us with that beautiful texture. It's really wonderful. So I did this on the embroidery machine, but it's still quilted. This little bag I did with regular C3, and it is really, it's hard to see black fabric here. I'll switch to a different camera so you can see this just a little bit better. So let's switch to this camera right here so you can see this in front of me. You can see the texture, because I used white thread on black fabric, you can see the texture of the quilting. So it's this orange peel design that I just did with my embroidery machine. So I did embroidery machine quilting on my material before I turned it into the little bag. This is the bottom, by the way. And you can just see the texture. You can kind of see the thread because I did use white, because I wanted it to be obvious that I had done some quilting on it, but it's not super obvious. So it's a very delicate situation. Again, here's the quilted with the machine embroidery. I just have a diamond pattern. And the stitches, you don't really see the stitching. They sink in between the fibers. What is fun about using the serger, and here's where we get to today's project, is that we can do some quilting on the serger that lets our thread stand up on top of the pile of the fabric. And so on this bag, I have done the lines of quilting, just like the pattern instructs us to do, but I've used my serger and I've used a stitch called a 2-thread chain stitch. So this is a cover stitch feature. It's very easy to accomplish on the Bernina L890, but I want to show you how to do this. So if you have a serger, especially if you have the Bernina L890, I think you're really going to love using it to get this wonderful quilted texture that's also very tactile. Let me show you another couple of examples of this. So the fabric line that we're going to be using today is the Quilting Cuddle in the Wanderlust colors, or the Wanderlust collection, and it comes in 2 colors. It comes in this pink and orange, and then this blues and purples. We're going to be using the blues and purples for our assembly today. Here's some more cover stitch and chain stitch quilting. You can see really well on this Meet Me in the Garden. This is it's kind of purples and greens. It's very soft, very romantic. And I've got some cover stitch chain stitching as well as cover hem. And the way I did this is I actually sewed on the back. So I'm sewing blind, but I've put decorative threads in my looper, in the cover stitch looper. And then I've just kind of doodled with my machine as I went along. And this thread actually has a little bit of sparkle in it. These are beautiful threads called Glamour by Wonderful. And so they have a metallic color in there. And so on regular Cuddle fabrics, especially on Luxe Cuddle, these threads would sink down in the fibers and you really wouldn't be able to see a lot of them. I mean, because these are thicker threads, this is a 12 weight thread, you might be able to see a little bit of it, but you certainly wouldn't be able to see all of this texture and the sparkle that you can really see on top of the Quilting Cuddle. So even this one right here, I have used a thread with a little bit of sparkle. So one of the things that you'll want to do is, as you're working on projects with Quilting Cuddle and with the serger, is you'll want to do some testing. And so I kind of tend to keep my little chunks of pieces as I cut them away from the project. And instead of starting on my project first, I will work on the little pieces just until I get my stitching down right. So this is a piece right here where I've gotten this chain stitch going, the 2-thread chain stitch with the needle thread on the top. So this is what I see as I'm serging. And then when I take my piece off the machine and I turn it over, I see these gorgeous chain stitches. And this is that Wonderful thread, the Glamour with the sparkle in it. And of course, this is through the 2 layers of Quilting Cuddle plus the soft and stable in between, like the pattern asks us to do. On this little piece right here, I was testing all kinds of things. So I was testing some different chain stitch settings or cover stitch settings. And I was playing with the length of my needle as well as the kind of the width of the cover stitch. I was playing with decorative threads on the edging just to see what I could do and to see how far I could push it. So this is what I saw from the back as I was stitching. Okay, so there's all my lines, my practice. And then when I flipped it over, then I could see how those chain stitches sat on top of the fabric. And I love it. There's not a bad thing on here. I just really loved the effects. If you are interested in this process, let me recommend a couple of resources to you, first of all. So this is all in addition to the pattern from by Annie, but some of my resources that I've really enjoyed using, this is the Big Book of Serger Quilting that is from Bernina. It specifically deals with the Bernina L890 machines and the settings that you would use to get the effects that you're looking for. And I've played with these with Cuddle fabrics, especially with the Quilting Cuddle, because there's been so much. And you can see that I've got my Post-it notes for some of the pages that I reference often. Another book that I found really helpful is this book by Gail Yellen called Serger Essentials. And Gail has really helped me see some of these fun techniques with the cover and chain stitching on here. And so I definitely recommend this book. If you have a serger and you're wondering, you know, is there more to my serging life than just those serge seams on the inside of a garment? Yes, absolutely. Lots of surface embellishment techniques. Gail Yellen is pushing the envelope of what you can do and how much thread you can put through your serger. So this is a gorgeous book with all kinds of great details. So this is called Serger Essentials by Gail Yellen. Okay, you can get both of those at your local quilt shop. So let's get into our project. Okay, I'm going to move these things around and we're going to take a look at our project first. So this is the back, the front and the back of the pattern. In the pattern, there is also a coupon so that you can see Annie sew this out all the way through in her video library. So that information is in the pattern when you get it. It tells you all of the fabric that you need, and you can see but all the sizes of the bag, small, medium, and large, are all fat quarter friendly. So this is the small. It's quite small. It's very cute, very petite. It fits in your hand. It is about, let's see, from 20 to 25 at the corner edges of the bag. It's this part is 5 inches long. Okay, and so it's just under that wide when the bag is smushed flat. The largest bag ends up from corner to corner down here at the bottom. This is 9 inches long. So the medium is in between those two. So 5, 7, and 9 inches are the sizes of the bags in the pattern. We're going to be doing the small bag here just because you'll be able to see it on camera best. But I have several different ways that I wanted to show you. So you'll need the fabric for your main and then for your lining. You absolutely can line your bags with Quilting Cuddle as well. I have a couple that I've done that way, but on these, I'm going to use Quilting Cotton on the lining just because there is not a lot of Quilting Cuddle out in the world, and so I don't have a whole lot. And I've been trying to save it. So we've been making projects with Quilting Cuddle, and literally at some point in the last few weeks, because there's been so little of it in the world, I was taking apart projects with sample fabric that I had stitched before just to test things out and using that fabric over again. So it is coming though. So I mentioned that in the beginning, if you will like and share this video, you have the option to win a fat quarter bundle, but just know that those fat quarter bundles actually aren't here yet. We're still working on those, but stores will have them probably at the latest mid-September. But our customer service team will take care of you. If you are the winner, they'll get in contact with you and tell you, keep you updated on where the Quilting Cuddle is and how fast it's getting to you. But you will be among the first people to get to use it if you are one of our winners today. And we have 3 winners, so that's very exciting. Okay, the other things that we're going to need is we're going to need some By Annie soft and stable interfacing, which if you've made By Annie bags before, you're familiar with this product. It's a foam interfacing that has a fabric on both sides so that it is easy to work with. And you don't need a whole lot. If you have a half of a yard, you can make all 3 bags from that piece of half a yard. We'll also need some fusible interfacing. I'm going to be using SF101 by Pellon, which is a fusible interfacing. It's a woven interfacing that doesn't have a lot of stretch. And I've got my piece here, and we're going to be cutting this to size when we get to that point. And you'll also need some zippers. So if you want to use a zipper that is just, that already has the slide on it, you'll just need a 24-inch or longer single slide zipper. I like using the zippers that come by the yard. And so I have my zippers prepared right here, and I've already put my sliders on. I do like a bag with 2 sliders on it because I like the way these dangle and sparkle. And so on this bag, you can see I've got a similar kind of zipper, and I've got my zipper sliders where they meet at the top and the middle, because this just makes me happy. It's so fun and dangly. And I think with this fabric, having that extra sparkle and glitz by having two zipper pulls is just really fun. So I'm going to use that, and I've already got my zipper prepared. When I put my zippers together, I kind of mark on them what size they are. And so for this size, I'm going to need the 18-inch one. So that information on how big your zipper needs to be is in the pattern. You can get these zippers also at your local quilt shop. So if your quilt shop has the By Annie patterns, they will also have the supplies that are all listed on here. So be sure to check the back of your pattern to pick up everything that you're going to want to get to make these bags. The other thing that you'll need is some hardware. You might want some hardware. It does say it's optional on here. And if you choose to use hardware, you can use the D-rings, triangle rings, or the swivel hooks. I've got a couple of those here. And, these come in all kinds of sizes, and you can find them at your local quilt store. You can also find them online from places like Waywack. That's a favorite of mine to get bag making hardware. So this is a rainbow zipper pull. You could also use, a plain D-ring, and they come in all different widths. So one of the things about these hardware things that you'll need to understand is the way you measure the hardware is by the opening of the inside. So this interior measurement right here at the top at the flat edges, this is how this hardware is measured. It may often tell you how long the piece of hardware is, but the important thing to remember is this interior measurement right here. That's important because we're going to be making some little straps for the bottom of our bag. Again, here's my bag. And these are grab tabs. So this one does not have any hardware on it. They're simply the pieces of Quilting Cuddle that I have interfaced and then inserted into the seam. But if you put the hardware on it, you could do things like have one so you can clip this bag onto something else. So maybe you're traveling and you need a bag that has some essentials that are easily accessible. You might want to clip like this. If you use just a regular D-ring on it, you can also clip that somewhere else. So the small bag actually would make a neat little goodie bag for your backpack or something like that. This larger one, I can see being used in a traveling situation, especially if you're going somewhere special and you need to have your essentials handy, like you're part of a bridal party and you need those, you need some bigger things, like you need your brushes and you need your hairspray and maybe those things for quick touch-ups, but they're a little bit bigger and bulkier. You might want the large bag, but this hardware will actually help you keep it really handy. If you're using these for school supplies, you could also clip it onto your backpack if you use a hardware like this. But there's all kinds of options, and these are optional though. You don't have to use these, but they make it super fun. So the ones that I have here are rainbow because I thought they went really well with this Wanderlust. Okay, but hardware comes in all kinds of finishes. So you may choose to match the hardware that you get with the hardware for your zipper pull. So you've just got so many options to really customize these bags in really special ways. Okay, let's check our comments really quick because I don't want to forget anything here. Oh, I see lots of people here, so I'm so glad that you're here. Let's switch this so I can talk to you real quick. So yeah, be sure to check out the blog post today on the Shannon Fabrics website because it'll have all of the details, the supplies that I'm using, and resources for learning more about the Quilting Cuddle fabric, which is just wonderful. We keep talking about how great it is, and I can't wait for y'all to get your hands on it because even when they were telling the Cuddle ambassadors about how wonderful it was going to be, we were like, yeah, but we don't really know. You don't really know until you touch it. But we're all so much closer to getting the real thing in our hands that I know that it's really going to be something special. So anyway, those details will be on the blog post for today. And it's the Sew Together Live Season 1, Episode 10, How to Make a Zipper Bag with Quilting Cuddle. Okay, let's see. Oh, I see questions about what's the difference between a serger and a regular sewing machine. Well, that's a really great question. And we're going to do a little bit of sewing with both machines today. I'm going to show you on the serger first to start, because we've got to get the quilting done on our fabric before we actually construct the bag. The way Annie's patterns are written is that you start with a piece of quilted material where you've got the quilt sandwich with your layers of quilt fabric and that interfacing together, and then you construct your bag from those. So I've got some that I've already started, but I wanted to show you, kind of the middle, the beginning, the middle, and the end process all at the beginning. And so what I've done is I've made some quilt sandwiches. Okay, so here's a quilt sandwich where I have started some of my quilting. Now, we already know that Cuddle fabric has a nap, right? We talk about the nap a lot. The nap is the direction of the fabric as you pat it down. You can kind of feel when one way is smoother than the other. Now, when we're working with directional fabrics, we often need to be thinking about the way the fabric lays, because when we're making a bag pattern like this, we need to pay attention to which way the fabric goes so that on both sides we have a similar effect. Yeah, does that, in the grand scheme of things, if you're starting out with Cuddle fabric making a bag and you don't pay attention to the nap, is it the end of the world? No, it's not. But if you're somebody that loves precise things, and I admit I'm not somebody who loves precision, I do love texture though. And so for me, it is kind of important that the way the bag feels, because I'm using Cuddle, is consistent, because I have texture issues. And so I want to keep those consistent, right? So I'm going to think about the fabric as if it were a print. And I have a print. This is the Wanderlust Big Cats in blue. And this fabric you can see, so let's just hold this piece up. So it's a directional fabric. So the cats are all standing up. Okay. If I were to do this bag and to do the cats with one piece of fabric for the whole panel, on the other side of the bag, one side would have my cats right side up and the other side would have my cats upside down. This actually helps with the nap. This helps think through how the nap works. So what I've done is I've taken a piece of the Quilting Cuddle that's directional, and I've actually cut it across the middle, and I've seamed it in the middle up with the, I'm going to call it the feet. The feet of the cats are pointing toward each other. And that way, so when I sew it like this, these cats are standing up with their heads on this side, and these cats are standing up with their heads on this side, and their feet are coming together in the middle. I don't actually have feet coming to the middle, but if you wanted to, you could get fussy like that. You can see that better when I'm talking about the cats, because they're standing up this way, and then on this side, they're standing up this way. And when we make the bag, when we fold it up together, both sides will have cats going up and down. Does that make sense? I think that's really helpful to help us understand how the nap goes. On some of the other printed Cuddle fabrics, the Quilting Cuddle fabrics, it's not as critical that you have cats standing up, because they're not all elements with those specific, cats that are going a certain direction or other things. And so they have more of a geographic or a flowy feel, maybe a floral pattern. This one is called Rainbow. This is the Wanderlust Rainbow in blue. This is the Wanderlust Rainbow in pink. So again, the same collection, just different colorways of it. And so on this one, what I chose to do is, instead of having my nap go and making a seam in the middle so that my nap goes both ways, this fabric, the direction of the fabric is up and down. But instead, I'm going to work with the Cuddle going up, with the nap going across. Okay, the reason I'm doing that is because if I were to put the nap, and I had to make the seam in between it, so on the back I would have a seam, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with a seam, and the seam is perfectly fine. But I didn't want to do that on this. I just wanted to get to sewing. And so I just put it sideways going across so that those texture, the feel of the nap isn't as noticeable as it would otherwise be. Does that make sense? Let me know if that makes sense in the comments. Okay, good. I hope so. It's just a personal preference. So if the texture matters to you when you're sewing a little project like this, then that's something to pay attention to. For some people, it may not matter. But like I said, I have these texture things and I want to get it right. So let me show you a little bit about the drape of the fabric. So this is the Quilting Cuddle. It's so drapey, and it's, I call it really wearable. Like, that's the only way I can describe it to you really well. It's very dense, but it's not heavy and hot. It's got the same luscious feel as Cuddle fabric does, and it also acts like Cuddle fabric, where it doesn't, you have a little bit of Cuddle dust as you cut it, but because the pile is shorter, it's not as dramatic, so there's not as much. But also, in the same way that Cuddle is a very high quality fabric and it doesn't keep shedding once you've cut it, the Quilting Cuddle is also very high quality, and it doesn't, like, I can't pick out the Cuddle from the surface of the fabric. It's just really, really well made. And so this is not going to get threadbare over time. So high quality, it's so lovely. When you get it, you're going to love it. Okay. So let's go back to the serger. So a serger is different than a sewing machine in that we've got the option to use many different threads. We've got many needles that we can use. So on mine, I actually have 5 different places where I can put the needle, and I have 5 different threads that I could use. And that's really kind of at a minimum, because as I've learned from Gail Yellen in her book, she often stacks her threads together. Let's switch over to the serger so I can kind of point these things out to you while we're talking. Got fabric all over the place here, so I don't want that to get in the way. So here is my serger real quick. And she's so pretty. She's so fun. So I've got all these places where I can have different needles. So I have it set up for the chain stitch, which is a cover stitch feature right now. And I could have 3 needles over in the cover stitch area. So I've got the left needle set. So I could have the left needle, a center needle, and a right needle over in this section. On this other section is what you would have in a standard serger that's just a serger, not a serger or an overlocker and a cover stitch. And so this would be my left and right needle. Some sergers have more needles and because they have more threads. This one can hold up to 5. So I've got 5 places for my threads in the back here. Let's see if you can see that just a little bit. I've got 5 I've got 4 cones on here right now. Really only 2 of them are threaded, but because I'm going to be using the 2-thread chain stitch, I'm only using 2 needles. But what I have that's different, instead of a bobbin, I've got these looper threads. So there are 3 places for the looper in this machine. Let's come over here just a little bit so you can kind of see what's down inside this machine. These are the loopers. So I've got a looper here, here, and here. And I've got an upper looper, a lower looper, and then this chain stitch looper. The neat thing about this machine is that I don't have to wind my threads. There is a threading diagram right here, which is really nice. But I don't have to consult it all the time, because what this machine has that's really wonderful is an air thread system. So I can bring my threads from the needle over the front and through the path, and then I can let the air threading system take the threads and thread it all the way through. So I'm not concerned all the time about switching my threads. I know for a lot of people, they may be intimidated by the serger because of the threading situation. This machine has taken all the worry about that away for me. And so I'm going to close them up and so we can sew. But it's really, really easy to use. The other thing that's neat about this particular machine is that I have all of this help stuff on the screen. So while I have the big book of serger quilting and I have my Bernina manual handy, I haven't had to use them a whole lot because the onboard features of this machine are so helpful that I can adjust all of the settings if I need to right from this screen right here. And if I ever don't know how to do something, there is a guided animation screen that will walk me through the process and play a little movie telling me exactly what to, where to thread, which foot to use, where to unthread, which path to go through. It tells me all of that right there. So I don't have to worry about much of anything. The other thing that it does for me is it automatically takes my tension. So I'm not having to switch my dials, look up my settings in the book for each particular stitch. This machine has, I believe, 34 or 35 different stitches built into it. And then you can actually customize your stitches a little bit more, save those into the memory. We have a little heart here. So you can save your favorite stitch settings so that you can go back to them again without resetting it up that time. So that's just lots of fun. The other thing that a serger does that's a little bit different than a sewing machine is we have something called a differential feed. So right here on the, let me click on the differential feed. It's this setting over here on the right, and you can kind of see, let's see, you can kind of see that you have a piece of, let's imagine that those are pieces of fabric, and one is kind of squished together and the other one is stretched out. The differential feed adjusts how the feed dogs take the fabric in, and it's almost like a walking foot that you can adjust. So your serger presser foot plus the feed dog system work together to get the fabric in. And when you're working with knit fabrics, Cuddle is a knit fabric. So this is a great way to use, you know, the features of your serger. You can gauge what is happening on your fabric and then adjust your differential feed so that you get perfect, even stitches where your fabric lays flat and you won't have stretching or gapping. Anyway, it's just a neat feature to use. And so that is one thing that I think is really fun. Okay, let's get this back so you can see. Now that I've zoomed you in close, because I do want you to be able to see what I'm doing. Okay, so I am going to be using the 2-thread chain stitch, which I already have set up here. And this is the first thing that you'll do on the first page of the pattern is you'll do some quilting. And so we're going to do some quilting on this piece with the big cats. I've gotten a piece of quilting cotton for the back side here. So that's going to be my lining. You can use Quilting Cuddle, but again, like I said, we don't have a whole lot of it. So I'm still trying to conserve it. On this piece of fabric, I have already started stitching, and these lines are what I see as my machine or my fabric is going through the machine. So I have just quilted some straight lines through. And I am using the edge of my presser foot as kind of a guide for where I want my lines to be. When you're using the chain stitch features or any of the cover stitch features, unlike with a sewing machine, you don't want to start off the fabric and then send your fabric into the thread. You want to start with the needle in the fabric. And so what I'm going to do is I've got my presser foot down. I've got it, my needle aligned. You know, I'm going to come this way and sew a straight line that's, you know, about 3/4 of an inch away from my other stitching. And I'm just going to stitch a nice straight stitch down the fabric. I can start slow and speed up. I'm using a presser foot just like I have with my sewing machine. And I'm in control with the speed. And I'm just sewing, you know, another one of these lines. And it's so quiet, y'all. I mean, I know I've got some noise canceling sound things on, but it's really, really quiet. And there's my stitch that I just made. Okay, let's get a little bit closer. So what I have in here, it's not regular thread. You can see I've got multicolored thread here. It's a variegated thread. I'm actually using a bonded polyester 12 weight thread that's intended to use for top stitching. I really want it to show up on this. And so I thought it would be really fun to have that top stitching thread show up on my quilting. So I'm doing that. I've got one more line to do on this. So let's do that really quickly. And you can see I started with my needle in the fabric. I didn't go up to the needle. I put the presser foot down and then started sewing. I'm keeping track of where this edge of my presser foot is. And so that's a trick that I do, whether I'm quilting on the sewing machine or on the serger, is I'm not watching the needle. I'm watching where the edges are. So if you're not used to doing that and you need markings, there is a guide that you can get so that you can attach that to the needle bar and get those precise adjustments so that every time you make a line, they're perfectly placed. But I I don't mind a little bit of imperfection in my quilting. I think that makes it look a little bit more handmade, but I'm okay with that. If you're not okay with that and you need a little bit more precision, then you might be interested in that. The other thing that you can do is you could put a piece of tape, um, painter's tape, or there's sewing safe tape. I know that Floriani R&K makes one that I use a lot for machine embroidery. It doesn't gum up your needles if you accidentally run over it, but you could use a piece of tape like that to kind of help you get consistent lines in there. So I'm just going to add that one last line of stitching right there. And I'm going to remove, what I'm doing is I'm clearing the thread off the stitch fingers. A serger stitch is formed by those lower loopers, those lower areas, wrapping around some little forks. They're called stitch fingers, and the thread, this chain, is actually formed on those stitch fingers. So now I have this wonderful texture on top of this wonderful fabric, and I'm really excited about that. On this one, where I have the cats, what I want to do is I want to think about my piece of fabric, and so I really want this seam to be right in the bottom middle. On this bag right here, what I did, because I had seamed those two pieces together, is I did a stitch called a cover stitch with some textured thread. This is the Wonderfil Glamour. Still, it's a peachy color with like a little holographic shimmer in it. It's super fun. It's hard to capture the sparkles on camera, but if y'all know me, you know I love sparkles. And so I was really excited to use that. But what I want to do is I want to make sure that I get this line. And so what you might want to do, just so you can get that line precise. Okay, I'm not going to say perfect, because there's rarely anything that I do that is technically perfect, but sometimes close enough is good enough, is I'm going to go ahead and run that top stitch right on that seam line. Okay, and I'm letting the machine doing the work. I'm not pushing. It's doing all of the work itself. And again, I have tested it to make sure that I, have my settings. My stitch length is at 3.3 millimeters long. So it's a nice, it makes a nice chunky little top stitch with this chain stitch feature. And then now what I have is I have a perfect line on the inside of my bag. Because this print is kind of on the grid, it's pretty close, but it's not precisely, right. I could have done a better job and moved that there, but that would be a lot. But here's my bottom center line. Okay, the other thing that the pattern says to do that we're going to do a little bit different is that the pattern tells you to measure and then cut out each piece of fabric. Well, I like making things over and over again. And so what I did instead is I took the pattern instructions for the piece. You'll be making marks and then drawing those things on here. And instead of doing that on the piece of fabric, the quilt sandwich itself, I did it on a piece of template plastic. So you can get template plastic at your quilt shop. I've made a couple of them. This is my small one. This is my large one. Mine are folded because we have some markings that we need to do on the pattern. The pattern would tell you to do these markings in the part of constructing the bag. I'm going to do them on my template, and so I can get fold lines so that after I have traced this out on my fabric, I can just make those markings happen because I have the shape already done. And so also, once I have creased it like this, it fits into my pattern storage bags a lot easier too. So that's just a little tidbit. I love making templates though, and template plastic is pretty easy to get. Your local quilt shop will have that as well. Let me double check. Y'all are so sweet. It's all so good. Yeah. Could you put iron-on vinyl in the cotton and still use the serger and the cover stitch? That's a really good question. So one of the things that we're doing with Cuddle fabric in general is we're using a bigger needle. Okay, so in my serger, I've got a 9014 needle. This one is a specific serger needle. It's also specific for stretch fabric. So I've got a 9014 SUK. Here's a a little bundle of them. So this is a cover stitch assortment, and these are not the needles that I have in right now, but it's the ELX 705 CF for cover stitching. I'm using the 9014 size because Cuddle fabric is a thicker fabric. So just like regular Cuddle, we're going to sew with a 9014 stretch needle. For my serger, I'm using a 9014 SUK, which is a stretch needle for serging. Okay, does that make sense? The fabric isn't hard to sew through. It's just thicker, if that makes any sense. It's very dense and lovely. So I think about it, it has the same feel on the top as a really nice velour or a velvet, but it's a lot denser. It's a lot more dense than a velvet. So there's more fibers, there's more going on. I feel like if we were to look at this under a microscope, we would see a lot more fabric to give it that nice soft feel. And so because of all of that fabric and all of those fibers in there, it's thicker. It just takes up more room in space. And so we're going to use a stronger needle so we can make sure that we're penetrating well without getting skipped stitches. Because we've got all these layers of fabric, we've got the Quilting Cuddle. We've also got the by Annie Stabilizer, which is a foam with fabric on the front and the back of it. So it's a thin piece of fabric to keep it all nice and tidy. I think this one actually has a little bit of fusible on it as well. Plus our quilting cotton. This is a lot of layers, and it's not hard to sew through, but I'm going to give my machine the best opportunity by using that 9014 needle so that I can go all through these layers without any issues at all. When you sit down at your machine, test it out. So keep those little scraps and do some little test pieces and see what happens. On this one right here, I'm going to get real close to this. I'm not afraid to show you my mistakes. Okay, this is called a skip stitch. You can see where the chain stitch goes along really nicely, and then all of a sudden we have a gap right here. The thread is still there, and I'm not going to pick at it because it'll all come apart from one of the ends. But there's a skip stitch right here. What I did after this is I adjusted my settings and I changed the stitch length. I changed the differential feed. And I was already using the right needle, but even if you're not using the right needle, sometimes you can get those skip stitches. So all of those factors come into play when you're working with new materials. And so you need to do a little bit of experiment. So keep your scraps or start with, some little pieces of similar type fabric with all the layers that you've got going on. So this is a layer with the cotton, with the soft and stable, and with the quilting cotton. I feel like we haven't really sewn a whole lot. This project doesn't actually take a whole lot of time once we get going. So let's get going. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and do the quilting on this piece. And I'm not going to do as much as I did on the other, but I am going to put some quick lines through it. And I've kind of got my, I'm just eyeballing it. This is about 1.5 inches. There's where my needle is. There's a little groove on the presser foot that reminds me that my needle is going to hit right here. So if I needed to, I could actually, measure this out. I could use a seam guide. I could do all kinds of things to kind of keep that straight. I'm just going to stitch with abandon and just stitch through these. And I'm going to put 4 or 5 of these lines right there. You can just hear how quiet this is. The other neat thing about this machine is that I can just simply tap the pedal, the back of the pedal with my foot as I'm serging, and that lifts that lifts the needle for me. Okay. Now, when you're cover stitching and when you're serging, one of the things that you may be surprised by is that you have threads that we have to deal with later. So because these are not going to be part of the bag, I'm not dealing with those actually at all right now. I'm just going to let those be because I'm going to be trimming my bag pattern out of this piece of fabric. But if you're not crossing your seams later with either more serging or more stitching or somehow finishing those edges, then you'll need to take care of those threads and kind of secure them so that they don't come unraveled. Okay, let's see. Let's go right under here. I've got one more piece that I want to serge on the end right here and get a nice chain right there. And then I'm going to put 3 on the other side of the center as well. Okay, so there is my back tap, and I can do that. There's also a knee lift mechanism on for this serger. I don't have it attached because this table that the serger is at right now doesn't actually have room for me to adequately use the knee lift. So in case you're wondering if you have a similar serger and you always use the knee lift, that is very handy because it saves a little bit of time instead of reaching around to the back to raise the presser foot, but I don't mind doing that. So I'm clearing the stitch fingers. Do you notice how I'm pulling my fabric to the back instead of, as with a regular sewing machine, your threads come straight up out of the bobbin. In the serger, the threads are actually wrapped around the stitch fingers. And so I want to clear those stitch fingers by pulling straight to the back with my fabric instead of just moving my fabric out from under the needle sideways. So I'm always going toward the back of the fabric as I remove the fabric. Okay, that's the last one I think I'm going to do. Lift up the presser foot, trim off my threads. There is a thread trimmer on there. I'm just not proficient at doing that. Okay, so there's all my quilting stitching. I don't need a whole lot. I actually caught that bit up there. That's okay. And then this is the front. And I love how this variegated thread looks on the surface of the quilting cuddle. You can really see the different colors, the purples, the aquas, and the whites in there. It's just really, really lovely. Oh, you know what? I didn't answer the question about the vinyl. Yes, and I see that y'all are talking about it. So the vinyl, the quilting, if you want to use the vinyl on the cotton so that you have a waterproof bag, I do think that would be great to use after you've done this quilting part, because this is where I got off. This needle is a little bit bigger than a regular sewing needle. And so your vinyl fabric kind of, you poke a hole in it and it kind of grows back together a little bit. It still has a hole in it, but it kind of shrinks in. Because this needle is bigger, it has a bigger diameter, it's going to poke a bigger hole and it's not going to be as water resistant. So Cheryl, I do love the idea of doing your quilting and then applying any iron-on vinyl that you want to on the cotton side. Of course, I wouldn't do any vinyl on the cuddle side at all because it's so nice. Why would we need to do that? But if you wanted to make it waterproof, you absolutely could. Okay, now am I done with the serger? Maybe or maybe not. So we're going to do a couple of things with this bag. There's a zipper to put in. There are some pieces of hardware to put on, and we're going to do those in just a minute. That's what we're going to do first. But you could do this whole bag all the way through on your serger if your serger is capable of it. So this serger has a really powerful motor, and I have tested it to see, how far can we go here? And so I know that I can do all of those things with this serger. If you're not sure if your serger will handle this many layers plus a zipper, now this is not a metal zipper, this is a nylon zipper. This coil is plastic, so I can cut it with my scissors. I don't nick my scissors at all. I could cut it with a serger knife if I had to. It's not going to damage the machine, but you definitely don't want to do a metal zipper at all on a serger because you have the knife. You don't want to trim anything. You don't want to damage your machine at all. I just, this is an investment and you want to be careful with it and take care of it. I know the limits of this machine, and where I am not 100% confident of what I can get away with, I'll move over to my sewing machine, and we're going to do that in just a minute too. I did want to show you just some of the beautiful things that you could do with a serger that you may not be expected. Of course, with a regular serger stitch, you would be able to close those edges off, and you could get that nice, clean finish. You can see here, I didn't do a good job taking care of these are the thread tails from those stitches. So they're kind of caught underneath my serger stitches, but you can do a really lovely effect with decorative threads or variegated threads. This is a heavyweight thread in the looper, and then a regular, just a variegated embroidery thread in the other looper. So you get a really nice effect over the cuddle, which typically a fabric with fibers like this might stick through those stitches. But because this thread is a little bit thicker and the quilting cuddle is a little bit shorter with those fibers, it doesn't stick through. So we have more opportunities to play with surface embellishments on here. I think that's all I'm trying to say. Okay, let's get to sewing. Let's get to sewing. So this will be fun to turn into a bag. So I'm going to switch cameras. And so I want to show you kind of some more stuff in front of me so that you can see more of what we're doing. Okay, so I'm really just turning sideways to my sewing machine. And I'm going to show you some of how I use the templates. Now, this was my piece of soft and stable. There's my extra fabric. I'm going to move out of the way. And what I have right now is I have my template. So this is my plastic template that I made before. And I've got a ruler. And I've got my piece of fabric. So this is, again, the cats. Here's my center line. You can see those two guys are toe-to-toe right here. This head's down here, this head's down here. So I know that's my center line. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is flip my fabric over. And then I kind of made a visual with that big chain stitch where I stitched it from the front. The chain stitch showed up on the back. So that's my variegated line is really my center point. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure or match up this center line in my template onto the fabric right here. Let's get this just a little bit so you can see a little bit better. And I'm going to trace the outline of my template onto the fabric that I've quilted. Okay. In the pattern, you would actually be, if you weren't making a template, you would actually be doing all of these lines and creating this pattern on the fabric itself. Now, because I'm using a dark fabric, I've got this is a bowhen quilting marker with white lead in it. So I love these. This shows up really well. If it also makes a really fine line, which I really love. If you have another marking tool, you absolutely can do that. But I'm simply going to trace around my template. I'm holding it quite securely. And I'm using some of these guidelines, the Serger stitching lines, kind of as a guide to help me keep everything straight. Because we're going to actually need to add some more lines. They're not serged lines, so I don't need the texture. I just need the kind of a visual marker so that when the bag is, we're sewing it together, it's nice and tidy. I am really close to the edge here. So I'm going to try to be very precise with my pen. And if a silver permanent felt tip marker works better for you, you could definitely do that. If you're using a light fabric and you want to use a darker felt tip pen that's a permanent one, you could do that. A chalk marker might work also, but sometimes I find that the chalk markers, those the chalk dust kind of goes away before I'm ready for it to go away. So I don't want to do that. And so there is my outline of my template. Okay, you see, I tried to draw it as carefully as I can. I had a little bit right there. This pencil does have an eraser, and so any places that really bug me, I could simply erase. And the rest of these lines that I have made are going to be the edge, and I'm not going to worry about trying to remove those at all because they're part of my cutting line, right? So, and don't worry about marking on your fabric if that's something that may bother you. On this one, I have drawn my lines with a micron pen. So this is a permanent felt tip marker. And it is a very, very thin line. And so I have it right here. But I also have done lots of registration marks here just for me. This was my center. Okay, and instead of stitching a line all the way through, you can see I missed that center line. I put some little dashes just to help me remember where the center is right there. Okay. And then I have the centers of the top and the bottom, which I'll need when we're putting in the zipper, but I've kind of written all over it. If you look inside of a stuffed animal or something that, you know, maybe your dog chewed it up, you will see markings like this in the seam allowances all over the place. So don't ever feel bad about writing on your fabric if that's something that worries you. Okay. So here is my template, and I'm going to go ahead and cut this out right now. There's another couple of pieces that we need as well, but I'm simply going to cut this. You can cut this with a rotary cutter or with your shears. Either way is fine. When I'm using the quilting cuddle, I do like to use some scissors that are micro serrated. I feel like they grip it a little bit better. And some of these tips that I'm giving you, they're the same things that we talk about when we're sewing with cuddle. Um, but because it is a cuddle fabric, it's 100% polyester, and it's very similar. It's not exactly the same though. So we've learned the rules for sewing with cuddle, and now we can adjust that for sewing with the quilting cuddle. So I like to say we learn the rules so we know how to break the rules. You might not be a rule breaker like me, maybe you're a rule follower. So that's okay. It takes all of us to make the world go round. All right, so I'm almost done cutting out my bag. You can see how tiny this is. And these scraps that I'm cutting off, I am not going to simply discard them. I'm actually going to save them because these are now little pieces that I can practice on. So this would be a nice place to practice some stitching. How does it work? What happens if I do this? That's probably one of my favorite questions to ask. What happens if? So I'm going to save those pieces in my scrap pile and toss the rest of that away. And now I've got my bag. So you can kind of see here how things are going to start to take shape. So our bag is actually going to be constructed like this. We're going to put the zipper on the top, and then we're going to fold these edges so that it's kind of like a little origami project so that they meet here in the middle. Okay, then we're going to sew these things down. But let's add some, what she calls in the pattern, grab tabs. The grab tabs are the little pieces at the end of the bag so that you can hold on to something while you're manipulating the zippers. This is also where that little piece of hardware could go if you wanted to clip it onto a bag. So let's make some grab tabs. And again, I could use my serger. In fact, I have a piece that I've already stitched with my serger to make a little grab tab. So the measurements are all in the pattern, and you would just simply cut those out. You could use template plastic. If you're going to make a lot of these, then make a template for that piece. But I use that serger chain stitch, the 2-thread chain stitch, to actually seam this piece. And they call it the serger straight stitch. So they're not worried about ever running out of bobbin thread again, which I think is really fabulous. The other thing too is this thread that I've used here, because it's a bonded polyester and it's a little bit thicker for top stitching, it's very, very strong. So unlike just using regular sewing machine thread, which is generally 40 or 50 weight, this bonded polyester is a little bit thicker and it's a little bit stronger, and it's very, very tough. So I'm not super worried about ever popping those seams. So here is a little piece that I can use as a grab tab. Now, the pattern says that we should be interfacing these pieces with soft and stable, but I'm not interfacing the grab tabs on the quilting cuddle version of it because that's one extra layer of fabric. Remember that this is 1.5 millimeters thick. Quilting cotton is not that thick at all. So here we can imagine, if you can see the thickness of this little piece of interfacing, the thickness of the quilting cuddle. Those two together aren't much, but when you've got quilting cuddle already, you've got a lot of thickness to go through. Plus I've got the seam allowance that kind of just, it's in the middle there, it's sandwiched together, but that's still thicker, much thicker than it would be if you were just using quilting cotton that was interfaced with something like the soft and stable. So even if I roll this up several times, this is still much thinner than the quilting cuddle is. So I'm not necessarily going to interface it. But if you've done quilting, if you've done something with cuddle and you want to make a nice strap and you don't feel like it's sturdy enough, then my little secret trick for adding a little bit of structure and stability to something like a little strap like this is to use a piece of grosgrain ribbon. So I'm just going to snip a piece of grosgrain ribbon off and thread it through this tube. I could have inserted it as I seamed that together, but now this grosgrain ribbon adds some extra stability and strength without adding hardly any thickness at all. It's certainly not on both sides of the fabric plus the seam allowance. It's just this one layer of super strong tubing, and I can go ahead and add some top stitching to sew that together and hold it all down. Now my sewing machine came unthreaded, so let's thread the needle again. And then we'll put that down. Again, because I've gotten used to the serger technique of starting with my needle, my fabric right under the needle, I'm doing that more with my sewing machine, and I'm really liking the result that I get. Now on my sewing machine, I'm gonna go to a straight stitch. Looks like I was using a zigzag before. I want a straight stitch, and I'm adjusting my stitch length to be a 4.0. That's because this is top stitched on here. I don't need a lot of stitches. I just need it to, there we go. I just need it to hold this piece together and hold that ribbon in place so the ribbon's not shifting around. I'm going to lift it up. I'm going to go across the bottom just to kind of catch that ribbon a little bit more. And then I'm going down the other side. And the other thing too that I didn't mention over on the serger, but it's the same technique on the sewing machine. I also have the presser foot pressure lifted up quite a bit. On my machine, it's almost to 0, which means it doesn't mean that there's no pressure on the presser foot. It just means that it's not pushing down as much. On the serger, the same thing. I have the presser foot pressure very, very loose, or not loose. It's certainly not loose, but it's not pushing down as much. It's not putting as much weight on the fabric. Here are some of the other pieces. So let's go ahead and let's seam these and add the structure to them. You can see that I didn't actually cut that very straight. So we'll deal with that once we get a little seam in there. Okay, let's go ahead and put a little seam in there. I am simply watching the edge of my presser foot. All of the pieces in this bag, she says to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And what I tend to do is I tend to sew, then trim, and it gives me a little bit of extra, but then I can trim it off, and I actually have a much tidier seam inside there. I'm going to use my turning tool to reach in, pull this down, and grab it. Grow grain for the win. Yeah. This tool is called, Stephanie, this is a loop turner. This is by Dritz. It's a very simple little tool. It's got the finger, you can hold it with this one, and then you grab with this one, and it even has a little latch in case the thing you're grabbing is like an open weave, like if you're using mesh or something. So it's a super handy little tool. And again, like you can see that I can go into my tube, grab my piece of ribbon. Oh, come on, ribbon. Let's hook on there. So I've hooked on the ribbon. Again, this is on a part that I'm going to cut off, so I'm not worried about making a hole in it. It's fine. And then I'm going to go down through, and I just pulled it right through. Okay. And then I'm going to top stitch this one as well. And again, I'm kind of eyeballing it, but it comes out, the more you practice, the better at getting those consistent distances between your edges will be. So practice, practice, practice. There's no limit on how much you can practice. And really, it's fun to sew. So keep on sewing, y'all. And you'll be surprised at what you can do in just hardly any time at all. Okay, let's go around here and finish top stitching this one. And now I have 2 grab tabs that I can put on the bottom of my bag. Now remember that center line that we talked about? So there's my grab tabs. I'm going to cut off this extra. I don't need that. I don't need that. And I don't have to keep track of those at all. They can go away. This center line where our tiger, cheetah, cougar feet are meeting toe to toe, which they were out here meeting toe to toe. So heads over here. This is the center line. See the top stitching on the back? This is where I'm going to put my hardware tabs. And so I'm going to pick my hardware to use. And because I didn't, measure this at all, I need to make sure that this one is going to fit without this bunching up right here. So I'm simply going to use this little D-ring lobster clasp, and I'm going to make sure that it is centered over that line. And then instead of having that bulk of these 2 things, this is something different that I'm doing because I'm using Quilting Cuddle. I'm actually going to put one of those ends over there and one of the ends over on this side so that they are straddling that center line. And I'm going to use my Wonder Clips to hold them in place while I base that down very close to the edge. Okay, let me show you on this finished bag what that looks like. So this is how it looks when I'm putting that together. And we've got a lot of fabric that's really crazy to look at right there. But here's a better visual of that. So I've got my loops and they're on either side of that center line so that I don't have all of these pieces of fabric stacked on that center line. The reason I'm doing that is because I've done it the other way, like the pattern tells you to. And with the Quilting Cuddle, with that zipper, with the extra thickness of the fabric that we're using, that's a lot of bulk right there. And I don't want to play with that much bulk. You can, it's fine. Your sewing machine will sew through that. You know, it's not that it can't, it's just that I don't want to do it. So keep that in mind. And that's why practicing is really important. So because I've got those all clipped on there, I'm going to give this just a little bit of stitching. I've still got it at that long stitching. It's fine because this is going to be tucked into a finished seam later, so I'm not too worried about it. So we're essentially basing that on, and now that hardware loop is in, it's pointing toward the middle. This is the right side of the fabric. And so when it's flipped out, this will be on the outside of the bag and it'll be something you can grab onto. I'm not going to do that right now because you see I didn't backstitch and I don't want to risk that coming off. Let's take our other loop. It got away from me. Oh, there it is. And let's see if we want to put, I think we're going to leave that one. I think we're not going to put a piece of hardware on it, but I am going to do that same technique. So you could do it like this, and then your hardware loop will be like a little point, and that's fine too. Or you could have this as the front and this is the back. So it's just folded. So I simply folded it, and here's where my center line's going to be. And I've got not quite a point like I would if I did this. I have kind of like an A shape. And so I'm going to put that again right at the edge. And if I do it like the A shape, you can see that my angles, so here's the center, that these are kind of angled off. I'm really going to make them as close to flat as I can, which gives them a little bit more bulk over here, but it doesn't affect my bag at all. So I'm just going to, again, clip those down so I can get it underneath the presser foot and then stitch that down. Okay, here's my other clip. And let's stitch that down. And I'm stitching very close to the edge. This may be out of order with the pattern. I've made the pattern quite a few times now. And so every time I do it, I feel like I do something different, which is part of the fun of working with a pattern more than once, because you may have your own little twist that you want to put on a project. Okay, there's my other hardware tab. I didn't put a hardware on it, so it's just a grab tab now. And this is the hardware loop, so I could use this to hang on something. So that's how my bag is now. All right. Now, something that I think is really cool, and if you've done some by Annie projects already, you may have seen people that are doing what's called the binding hack. The binding hack means that you're using another piece of fabric to get a little bit of extra texture or different color on the edge. And so I'm going to show you the binding hack with Quilting Cuddle. Okay, so this is not part of the pattern. This is just a bonus, I guess. We traced the template that I had made specifically from the pattern measurements. So this is exactly as the measurements in the pattern are. Remember, though, that Quilting Cuddle is a little bit thicker. It takes up more dimension in time and space. It has more vertical volume than quilting cotton does. And so we've got a little bit more here. And so what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to trim about 1/8 of an inch off of my fabric right now before I put any binding on. The reason that I'm doing this is because there is a little bit of bulk, a little bit more bulk with the quilting cotton than there would be from regular fabric. And I don't want that to get in the way of this project. So, you know, you can eyeball it, or you could use a ruler and mark 1/4 of an inch and then get rid of that. Let me show you kind of what happens on this bag, and we're going to flip it right side out so you can see. There's another layer that we're going to be putting in here. And so I'm turning this bag completely right side out. So here's the bag, and I've got quilting cotton on the inside. When we get to the point where we put the bag together, oh, it's hard to see with this. I've got the binding on, and I've got this. And if you have the binding on and you haven't trimmed this edge right here, then your zipper is kind of squooshed right here where you need to sew it on. And it's not supposed to be squished. I have an example in cotton fabric. This is what it's supposed to look like. So you're supposed to have a nice straight edge with your zipper going across. So here's my loop. I've got a piece of hardware over here. And it's supposed to be this nice thing where your zipper just meets, and then you can, base that down, and you've got a nice, did I already base that one? Oh, I did. Yeah. So you've got a nice even little piece right here that's not so bulky. This is a lot thinner than Quilting Cuddle is. And so I'm making some accommodations for using the thicker fabric. This is something that I just figured out by playing with it. So because I've made this several times, I don't want a squished zipper anymore. I still want some extra fabric along the edges just to give it just something a little bit extra. I am going to use a pattern zipper, and you can get all kinds of fun zippers at your quilt shop, or you can use a plain zipper. There's nothing wrong with that. But I've got some pieces of, let's see, we want to use this. Nope, where'd it go? I've got some pieces of Quilting Cuddle that I've already kind of cut up. Now I have bags all over the place. So let's do a little bit of binding. We're just going to use this strip for now. So I've got a piece that I cut off, and this is about, let's see, let's measure it. How wide is this one? This one's 2 inches wide. Okay. So I'm just using the measuring tape, the ruler on my sewing table here. This is 2 inches wide. I don't need 2 inches. And so I'm going to cut it in half. You could get really specific and use a rotary cutter and a ruler if you would like to. If you're okay with a little bit of imperfection and you're pretty good at cutting a straight line, then you could do it like this too. There's no rules. This is the part where, the quilters pass out. Sorry. I'm not good at following the rules. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this binding on just like I would be doing with quilt binding, and I'm going to pin it to these edges that have the little contours, not these cutouts on the sides, just the contoured top edge. And I'm pinning it with the right side, or clipping it with the right sides together. And I'm going to do this all the way around. And because I cut my Quilting Cuddle on the cross grain of the fabric, this is not bias binding, it's just cut from the width of the fabric. I have a little bit of stretch. Okay, so it stretches in a similar way that bias binding would, but I'm not using bias binding. I'm just using Quilting Cuddle, and I just cut a width of it off. If you cut it lengthwise, it's not going to stretch at all. It doesn't stretch that way. It only stretches across, and even then it snaps right back. It doesn't get curly the way a jersey fabric would, so it snaps right back. It's really nice. Let's get a bunch of clips here so that this is a really nice edge. And I'm simply going to clip all the way across the top. If you go on YouTube, there are other videos of people doing binding hacks for some of the binding patterns. I just really love the extra bit of interest that those binding hacks give, which is why I think this is fun. So I'm clipping and clipping and clipping until I get all the way down to the end. Of course, you could add more clips. Of course, you could seam this on with the serger if you wanted to. That's totally fine. I did try that, and I did all the parts, even with the zipper. I wasn't a fan of using the serger for the zipper, but that could be partially because I don't have a piping foot with a gap in it like you would need if you were truly going to do a lot of bags with the zipper. So let me change my stitch length. I want to make this a little bit shorter. So I'm setting it to 3.5. I'm going right about 1/4 of an inch away from the edge. If you need to, you can put a foot on your sewing machine that is your 1/4 inch foot, but I'm simply lining the edge of the fabric up with this visual marker on my foot, and I'm sewing this piece of binding all the way around. Now, if you need help getting your fabric through, you can use your by any stiletto. That sometimes helps. I'm not having an issue right now, but it's nice to have one of those handy just to keep your fingers out of the way. We don't want to have any medical incidents while we're sewing. That's not fun. Okay, let's see. Oh my goodness, that sounds like sheer magic. Oh, Pam Massey. Hello, Pam. That belt loop folder, you know what? Let me show you. Do I have a piece over here? I did earlier. The belt loop folder is actually the tool that I was kind of trying to estimate the way the stitch looked on the serger, because and I didn't realize that my belt loops on my actual jeans were done with this same kind of 2-thread chain stitch. And so, yeah, I'll find that in a second and show you. So here's my edge. And so do you see how, because we use the stretch of the fabric around here, and now that binding just kind of falls over perfectly. Okay, I'm not going to do anything else right now to that side. I'm going to do the other side real quick and put the other piece of binding on the other side. Okay, you can see, like, we've hardly done any sewing. We've done a lot of talking, but because I'm talking through some of these parts, it takes longer than it actually does to make the bag. If it helps you put this in perspective, after I got my sewing room tidy yesterday, I made 3 more of these. So I may be at the limit of what I can do with this one pattern, and I should probably, venture off into something else, but they're just so fun to make. I can't stop. And while I have a little bit of Quilting Cuddle, I am definitely using it because these fabrics are so gorgeous. There's one other or two other colorways, another collection that's coming when this first batch gets here. It's called Cottage Rose, and it is just so sweet. It's got it's more of a demure style. It's very it's going to work very well if you like a more classic and floral, very light feel. It's got some picnicky elements though, so maybe a little bit of Americana. It just has a sense of, if you like sweet fabrics, you're going to love the Cottage Rose line. I love these bold, wild prints, and so the Wanderlust line here really, it just does it for me. It makes my heart happy. And especially this with the big cats. Can't get enough of them. Okay, we're almost to the end of this side, and I'm just following, that 1/4-inch edge on my foot there. Look in your manual. If you aren't sure if your foot has a 1/4-inch guide on it, you might be surprised when you open your sewing machine manual up that your foot has markings on it to visualize. Honestly, because I read the Serger books so thoroughly, I learned things about my sewing machine. Um, you know, Sometimes reading the instructions gets you places you didn't expect to go. You learn some things. So don't be afraid to read the instructions. Okay, there's my binding on the edge. And see, isn't that cute? It's not a whole lot. It's just a little bit of another detail, and I love it. I love that extra little detail there. It just makes me happy. Okay, I dropped the zipper. Let's grab the zipper now. Is this my 18-inch one? Yes, this is the 18-inch zipper. So let's move that pin. Now I've marked it so I know. Now I'm going to mark my zipper. So I need to find the center of the zipper. And again, I'm going to be using a permanent marker, but the black one is not going to show up. The white one's not going to show up. So what I'm doing is I'm going to look for my purple one, which I tried to set aside. Ah, here it is. Okay, I have a purple fine point permanent marker. This is the ultra fine point. And I'm folding my zipper so that I can find the midpoint. And the zipper is black and white. And so I'm going to use the purple as a visual and kind of make sure that on both sides I can see a purple dot. Okay, so I'm doing the same thing on this side, just marking a center. All right. Now on my bag, I'm also going to be marking a center. So you might want to get your template, and then maybe you need to make a little visual mark in the center. If you need to, you can fold your template. And again, I said, I fold it, and so then it fits in my pattern storage system a little bit better. And so you will take your bound area and your marking that you made on your template, and you will make a little bit of mark on your fabric. Now I'm using purple I wrote purple on my fabric. Is that going to matter? No, because I've got purple in other places. I just need something that I can see so that I can line up my zipper at the end. Okay, this one, I'm going to run into a little black place, but let's see if I can see the purple there, and I can. See, I can see the purple material or the purple marker even on that dark area, and it just blends right in. It's no big deal. If it bothers you, you could mark it with a pen. If you know, if it's a matter of what you're comfortable with, and I'm totally comfortable with writing on my fabric. It's not a big deal. Also, if people are worried about that, then I think that for me, they're looking too closely at my project. And if you're a sewer, you're allowed to do that. But if you are not a sewer, you are not allowed to inspect things that closely. The other thing that I'm going to do for my zipper is I'm going to sew over the ends. So I had already put my zipper pulls on. I didn't, it's like threading a needle. I didn't want to do that on camera because sometimes it's a little bit fiddly. And wouldn't you know it, that when I did these last night to get ready for this, they went on so well, so easily. So I could have done it on camera, but who knows if that would have actually worked. Okay, I've just run over the ends just a little bit with some stitches, just so that when I open my zippers in a little bit, I don't pull off the zipper tabs and have to do that again. So that makes it like a little stop. This zipper is actually quite a bit longer than I actually need it to be as well. So she tells you how long to cut it if you're going to use these zippers by the yard. And I've got it a little bit long because I need to make sure that everything is caught in the places where it's going to be caught. The other thing to notice is that in the pattern with the video by Annie, she may have you do the zipper a little bit differently. This is not wrong. It's just one way. And so because I'm using the Cuddle fabric, this is the way I'm going to do it. And so instead of putting the zipper face down and then flipping, I'm actually going to be putting the zipper behind the binding and then top stitching it down, kind of in the middle of my binding area. If your binding is not wrapping around and staying, then you might be interested in using some tape like this. This is the By Annie double-sided basting tape, and it comes on a little roll. Oops, this one's stuck in here. And then it's got a little paper strip, and you could put this right along the edge of the back side of your bag, remove the paper, and then stick your binding down so it's not going to go anywhere. I've done this a couple of times, and I haven't really had an issue. I had this out in case I needed it. Stand by. I may need your help. That's why I had this out here. But I haven't needed it, so I'm not going to worry about it right now. Okay, and we're just going to, as my daughter says, try hard to believe in yourself. So we're just trying hard and believing in ourselves. On this part, I actually don't need the zipper to be open. So I'm going to move both pulls down to one edge so that they're out of the way. And I'm going to start pinning or clipping this to the wrong side of my bag here. So I've got my center point. I'm going to match those up so that this is the center, this is the center. That's important when we get to the other side as well. There are some other markings that you may need to put on your bag from the pattern to help line things up correctly. But for what I'm doing right here, I feel comfortable in this. So you have to decide what you're comfortable with. And again, like I said, the more you make something, the more comfortable you'll be with it. And you can start to add your own creative touches to it. It's not bad. Let's see. It's just different. Okay, I'm going to open that up because I have some bulk and I don't want to deal with the bulk. There we go. The last one I made of these, I was playing with the serger last night, and so I didn't have that bulk there, and I was able to get that down there. And I'm going to just put the edge of that binding right up against those zipper teeth. Okay. All right, let's pin. I say pin. With Cuddle fabric, we're always pinning. We're keeping it under control. I'm using the clips. Have I even used a pin yet? I don't think I actually have used the pin today. I took a pin out of the Post-it note I had on the zipper, but I haven't pinned anything. So that's another thing that I think is a little bit different about the Quilting Cuddle. We haven't need to use so many pins like we have. It doesn't seem to wiggle as much as the regular Cuddle fabrics. And so I feel really in control of the fabric, even though I'm not doing all the pinning like I'm used to doing with Cuddle fabric. So it's just a little bit different. got some fun to it. Now, again, you could put on a zipper foot if you want to. I'm not going to because this is not, again, my presser foot pressure is up high because of the thickness of the quilting cuddle. And so I'm not really worried about these zipper teeth. It's not a disparity. If you needed to, you could use a bi-level foot. You could use a zipper foot if you wanted a thing. I'm simply going to just sew along my binding right here and sew that zipper on. So if you want to, you could do multiple lines of stitching. There's all kinds of ways that you could do this, and none of them are wrong. It's just what you feel like. So don't be afraid to experiment and see what you like. Okay, I'm giving you permission here. This is your permission to play and try some things that might be out of your comfort zone. I do not want to sew close to that zipper pull, and I do want that to wrap around a little bit. So let's tidy that guy up right there and just keep sewing that zipper onto the bound edge. All right, we got to the end. I'm going to stop my stitching. And look, this is just a little sneak peek, but isn't that cute? Look at that. So cute. So we've got the texture, we've got the cats, we've got a little bit of extra floral from the Wanderlust floral coordinate, and then we've got our zipper. We've got a little bit of the stripes. So that stripes, they kind of go with my stripy cat. You know what? We cut off most of him. Here's a little bit of his feet over here. So we got a little bit of tiger stripes. There's a little bit of his feet right there too. I could have fussy cut that if I wanted to, but I didn't. There's not that, I don't have that much quilting cuddle yet. Maybe when we get more in the world, we'll be able to do that. Now, because this is cuddle fabric and cuddle doesn't fray, I can simply cut off this cuddle that's underneath here. Remember, I didn't use a rotary cutter and I didn't trim that off straight. So I can simply take some scissors like my angled Kai scissors and cut off that quilting cuddle right there and do some extra finishing, just so that that's not sticking out. She has a technique for putting that on a little bit for securing the zipper in a different way in the pattern. But this is fine with me. I am totally fine there. If you wanted to, you could run another line of stitching and then that would hold the other side of the zipper down. I might do that later. I might hand stitch it down. I don't mind hand stitching. So, you have options. The world is your oyster. Okay, let's see. Let's unzip this again. And remember, we made a mark on this side as well. And so I need to match up this side of the zipper with that mark. Double check. Love it so far. Okay. Let's see. This is serge the binding on. Oh, yes. You know what? I got some of that fusible thread. I have not done it yet, but I actually have done it on a cotton quilt with the serger, but I haven't done it on quilting cuddle yet because I even have my iron heated up here so I could show you some ironing. And there's one more part where we need to iron the interfacing one, but I'm not really a big ironer. There, I just admitted that out loud. Now you know. Which is probably why I'm enjoying quilting with Quilting Cuddle, because it doesn't require that kind of finicky precision. I have a lot of room, I have a lot of leeway here, and I feel like it gives me the opportunity to have more fun. Let's put it like that. I have more opportunity for more fun without having to be so worried about all of the things that have stopped me from, doing precision quilting in the past. I mean, I've learned some tricks, and there's lots of fun to be had with quilting for sure. That is for sure. But yes, I can see that the fusible thread, if you serge this edge with the fusible thread on the back and then fused your binding down, that would actually be a perfect application for that right there. I'm out of clips. Let's get one more clip. I'm using the Clover Wonder clips, which are really fun. And, one of the things, see, I talk about the markings on the foot, but even on the Clover Wonder clips, they have these little markings on them. So you can get really precise measurements. There's measurements on the back, like those are all measurements. So if you need to measure things with your clips, you can. I'm always kind of matching things up to my cutting mat and then to my table, but I have learned that there are markings everywhere on my presser feet, on the clips, on the serger feet. And so I find that really fun because it gives me more, well, it gives me an opportunity to be precise where I'm not very precise, but it's just fun. It's just fun to know that. So now you know markings on the Wonder clips for quarter inches, eighth of an inches, things like that. All right, I'm going to sew this side of the zipper down. And remember, I matched it up to the middle. Did I say that I matched that mark up? And I'm going to sew that binding on. I'm just going right down the middle, catching the binding, catching the fabric underneath, catching the zipper. And I have a visual of where the zipper is. My foot is riding along just fine. If you need to use the zipper foot, you totally can. I just dropped something. Oh, that was loud. You totally can, but I'm not. If you're going to use your serger to put on your zipper, the other thing that you can do is you can use what's called a piping foot. And so that is super fun. And one of our other Cuddle ambassadors, Lisa Lewick, has been playing with a piping foot and then putting zippers in with a serger. So look for those instructions to be coming soon. She's just brilliant, and that's such a clever idea. Okay, now my binding's on. Again, I'm going to cut this off. Am I going to spend a lot of time doing that on camera? No, because this is all I'm doing. I'm using these curved scissors so I can get up under there and not worry about it. Cuddle doesn't fray, so I'm not worried about this all unraveling. I would not do this with quilting cotton because quilting cotton would just, fray and ravel and fall apart under there. But Cuddle does not. In fact, like there's a little bit of Cuddle dust coming off the edges, just the tiniest bit. But even as I'm picking at it, once that Cuddle dust is gone, this is not going to continue to unravel and fray. So fantastic fabric. It's just so fun to play with. Okay, so pretend that I've gone around there and cut that off. And now it's starting to come together. And you can see when I zip it up, how cute that is already. All right, there's one more part that we didn't do in the pattern. She has you prepare all your pieces for what are called the, let me show you, these side flaps. So these flaps kind of hold it together. So when it's in tray form, this bag is a dual duty. It's a clutter catcher. Okay, so you can use it as a tray, put all the stuff that is on your desk so it's not falling apart and keep it all together. Let's put all my clutter in there because I tend to collect it while I'm sewing. Let's put all this in here, and now my desk is clear. Okay, so all that's in my clutter catcher. These edges, what they do is they kind of support the ends, and they, except for those scissors that are way too long for this bag. That's probably too long too. Maybe you want to make your pattern a little bit bigger, but they kind of hold the tray into a tray shape. So they make it more rectangular. They act as a stop so that stuff isn't sliding out between the zippers on either end. And so we're going to put those supports in, and I'm going to use Quilting Cuddle. And now I'm actually going to use some iron-on stabilizer. So let me get that piece of stabilizer that got away from me. Here it is on the floor. And the measurements are in the pattern. She has you cut your pieces of the end, which I'm going to use this Wanderlust floral for. It's so cute. Can I show you this? It has these little peacocky looking, or paisley. This one's paisley, but these look like peacock feathers right there. And isn't that just really fantastic? I cannot get enough of this fabric. I just cannot. It just does all the things for me. So the pattern asks you to make the interfacing for these pieces, because this piece really is doing a lot of work because it's holding these edges together. It's also binding these raw edges here. So when we fold all these pieces down, let's do it from the wrong side. Let's pretend that we're ready to put those on. We've got our, we're going to do our little origami here and make a little sandwich with our zipper, with the grab tabs with the back, and we're going to sew that down. And we're also going to put one of these flaps on it, and we're going to wrap that flap over, and the top corners of the flap are going to stick out right here so that they will actually form kind of a structural guide for the ends of the bag. Okay, so the other thing that you can see, I'm so proud of how this came out because we did that trimming of the bag, that, just that little 1/8 of an inch off the top before we put the binding on. This is going to fit so nice and flat, and it's going to do exactly what it needs to do. So don't forget that if you're going to use Cuddle or Quilting Cuddle, you want to trim off that extra 1/8 of an inch so that everything lines up nice and flat right here. So happy with that. Anyway, the stabilizer for this piece is just about 1/2 of an inch less than the edges of this piece. So it's really important to me that I'm not giving you the exact pattern measurements because that is proprietary information. Get the pattern, you'll see all the measurements, they're all in there. And so because I've done this pattern so many times, I'm really gonna eyeball it. Well, I'm not gonna eyeball it. I'm gonna use a marker because that's how I do. I just use a marker and draw it. And this piece I know is cut to the right measurement. And one other adjustment that I'm going to make though, so the pattern tells you to cover the whole inside, away from the edges. And because the Quilting Cuddle is a little bit more stable, it's thicker than the regular quilting cotton, and I'm going to be binding that edge, I don't want an extra layer of this in there. So I'm going to go ahead and make my whole piece. I'm just drawing that. You could use a ruler. You could get really precise and crazy if you want to. I ordinarily I would be drawing that out precisely. I would be measuring it. We're doing a speed sew here, so we don't have a whole lot of time. And then I'm going to trim that edge so it's straight. See how it was kind of angled off there because it was the edge of my fabric because I just whacked it off of the roll over there on the other side of the room. And then this piece, so I've got 2 of these little flaps for the those edges. I just put one somewhere else. There it is. Okay, there's my 2 little pieces. They're a little bit wider than they are taller, so just barely. I cut this one square. I'm going to cut it in half because I don't want so much bulk, and it's not a lot of bulk. It's just enough though that it bugs me with the Quilting Cuddle, and I don't want to live with that annoyance. And I'm going to put it just on one side. So what we'll do is she has you make some markings, you mark at the top, and then this kind of angles. Is it in or out? Let me look at my pattern and see if it's in or out. Maybe you have the pattern in front of you. Yeah, it's just so it's going to keep the rest of the stabilizer out of the other layer. This is really strong on its own, the Quilting Cuddle. You could do it like that. This one little piece of stabilizer, though, just gives it a little bit of extra sturdiness. It's really imperceptible. I know it's in there, and so I feel good about putting that in. So I'm going to go iron this really quickly. I've got my iron over here to the side, and it's on and hot and ready. I'm just using my little Aliso iron right there, and I just really quickly press that on. So now it's adhered to this side, right inside. This is where our stitching lines are going to be, and it's inside there. It gives it just a little bit of extra structure. And, so you can see right here, I can stretch this side, and I can't stretch that side because I ironed that interfacing on. Okay, do the same thing on this next piece. Not a big deal at all. It's just a little bit of extra structure. It's not going to add any bulk. And the Cuddle presses well. So if you like to press things, you totally can. If you're not a presser, no big deal. You're fine. And I'm not gonna tell anybody that you're not pressing all your seams. It's fine. Okay, here's my other piece. I've got some Cuddle dust on there. And now see again, here's the part with the interfacing. This is the part without. See how it stretches? Crazy. Okay, so we're gonna give these, they're sewing, there's some markings that we do. And that way this fits on the edge of our seam right here. So it's all precisely measured and marked. So follow the instructions for getting these measurements for sure. And then I'm going to sew those measurements. I came unthreaded again. This is what happens on camera, is that we come unthreaded more than I'm happy with, but that's okay. We'll just thread it real fast. And yes, I do have an auto threader. I just prefer not to use it because it seems to me that it's faster to just stitch. Ready to go. So I am this seam angles out just a bit. Let's close that there, and I'm on this side. I'm gonna do the same thing. And so there's markings that I've made to do the angle just right on this piece. And cut that thread, and let's do this one. And I have my interfacing going all the way up to the center so that at that top part, it is nice and sturdy. And let's double check that right there. Let's just sew this line. I'm going to angle that out to the markings. This next part is actually really fun. And it's one of the cutest parts of the bag, even though it's kind of an insider, it's inside the bag. Nobody's really looking at the inside. It's just structurally clever, and I appreciate that. Okay, so I've made these angled pieces, and I'm going to cut this off just so that there's less bulk in there. If you're using quilting cotton, you don't necessarily need to cut those off. If you're using your serger, you absolutely could do the serger for this. Actually, you know what we're going to do? We're going to go back over to the serger because I want to show you how you can use it for top stitching these things down, because that's what we need to do next. Let's get rid of that, and let's go back over to the serger over here. Let's see. Let's get that ready. I think I bumped that camera. So let's get that back in place so that you can see what I'm doing. And I haven't changed any of my serger stitching at all. So let's move back over to the serger. And I've got it still set up for that 2-thread chain stitch. I've got my little flaps here, and I'm going to flip them right side out. Oh, I didn't cut that all the way off. Let's trim that off right there. Okay. And I'm going to flip it right side out. Okay. And now, actually, see, because I didn't back stitch right there, that came out. Let's fix that real quick while we're over here. I can fix it on my serger as well as I can fix it on the sewing machine. I'm going to line it up underneath my needle. Remember, when I'm using the serger, I'm always starting with the fabric right under the needle. And I've got a clear presser fit. This is number C23. If you're into presser feet, I'm using that clear presser foot so that I can see exactly where I'm stitching. Now, I'm not watching the needle while I stitch. Remember, I'm watching the edges. I'm watching the markings on the presser foot. I'm watching the parts of the machine as visual references, but I am making sure that when I start stitching, I'm stitching into the fabric first. It doesn't like it when you start and then push your fabric under it. It wants to start with the needle in the fabric. So let's give it what it wants, pulling straight out to the back and trimming it off. That is such a strong stitch, y'all. That the serger chain stitch, the cover stitch chain stitch is such a nice strong stitch. And we don't need to go back and forth to seam it because it's so strong, and it locks automatically with the way the machine works. Okay, so here's our little flap, and what we're going to do is we're going to top stitch all around the edge. I'm going to start at the bottom, and I'm lining it up. I'm lining my needle up. I've got about 1/8 of an inch, and I'm going to top stitch all the way around. Now remember that this serger chain stitch, because I've got that cool thread in the lower looper. Oops, let's see. Let's keep going. It's going to give me a little bit of neat texture on the other side. And you can decide at this point what you want to see. Do you want to see the chain stitches on the inside of your bag on this little flap? Or do you want to see a nice finished, straight stitch with just regular thread, which is, I've got the Mettler serger thread in the needle. So you have options, but it's a neat place that you can add a little creative touch. And I love that. I love kind of these little extra surprises, the little extra bits of texture, especially on this gorgeous fabric. There's just lots of room to play. All right, let's see. Here's my top stitch piece. So this is what the back, or the part that we were seeing. Okay, look at this, y'all. Is this not cool? Look at that chain stitch all around the edge, and it feels cool too. It just feels, so I told you I have texture things. I love texture. It feels so nice. It's very strong. It's very secure. I've got the detail. It looks like I did a whole lot of work. I mean, if I was doing that by hand embroidery, that'd take forever. But I didn't. I just did it on the serger. Super fun. And now I'm going to take this little flap. I've got my bag. So here's our bag that we finished with the sewing machine part. And I'm going to move the zipper pull on both. I'm going to do this on both ends. And then I'm going to fold. Let's do it like this. See how the end sticks out like this? I'm going to make this line flat and put the zipper right on my visual guide that I stitched down before. The center of the zipper is right there. And now I've got a little origami sandwich right here. Okay. On this side too, I've got that little origami sandwich. And I can, just stitch straight across there. I told you we weren't going to do that, but I think we're going to do it. Are we going to do it? We're going to do it. We're going to do it. I did it last night, and we can do it. We're going to just go across because we're already over here at this machine. And we're going to go across this edge, stitch this down, trim it off, and then put our little flap on. Then we're going to top stitch our other flap and stitch it on as well. I have some hand sewing that I'm going to do off camera at the end, but I'll post the bag in the group so you can see that I actually did, finish it. I don't like an unfinished bag. If I'm going to get a project done, I'm going to finish it. So I will indeed finish it. And we're not even struggling. We went right through that zipper right there. So I am being very careful though with my clips, to make sure I've got everything lined up right. Let's see, back it up, the needle. There we go. Cut that thread off. Now I'm going to trim this piece off. There was my zipper, right? All gone, nice and clean. Look how great that is. Now there is my super strong chain stitch on that side. It's so strong. It's so beautiful. I'm so happy. And then I'm going to do the same thing over here. So let's move our zipper pull out of the way. Line that zipper up with that mark right there. So my zipper's right there. Okay, I'm going to flip everything together and then put it under the machine and stitch 1/4 inch away and finish off that edge. Okay, this is the home stretch, guys. We are nearly done, and we're doing it on the serger. I really it's such a strong stitch. If I can get it under the serger, I'm doing it because I feel like I have so much more control, and I'm a control freak. I love to keep the seams in control, and that's what a serger does for you. It helps you control things. So we're going to use the tools. Okay, don't backstitch on the serger, but I'm going to lift the needle, pull it straight back, set my threads, set this off so it's straight. We're done there. Okay, there's my little, oh, y'all, look how close we are to the end. I'm going to clip that starting string off. But if we flip it right side out, I'm going in on those corners. Can you see it? Look how cute, y'all. Look how adorable we are. Okay, cute, 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 right? Look at our little lines of top stitching. You can feel them. Oh my gosh, they feel so good. Here's our little hardware bits for our grab tabs. Here's our zipper pulls. I mean, that's just adorable. So, so cute. We're not done though. Let's put those little, let's bind this edge with our little flaps. And then the inside will be as beautiful and beautifully finished as the front. So here's the first one we did. There's our top stitching, right? You can decide if you want your top stitching to show when your bag is open. So if you want it to show, you will see it. Oh, I forgot I had stuff in that. You'll see it right here. So you can see my serger top stitching right here on the edge of this one. And I have that facing the inside. And so that's what I think I'm going to do here. So what I'm going to do is when I put the bag together, you put this little flap on the bottom, and then you roll it over and catch it over here on this side. So you kind of bind that raw edge. And this part that sticks up, you tack it down. You can hand sew it. You can use some rivets. There's no wrong way to do it. On this bag, I used rivets, and you can see it actually makes it look like it has a little face. Isn't that cute? You don't have to use rivets, though. You can hand sew it. whatever you want to do. Just secure those top corners to the inside of the bag so that it does the thing to make it like a tray, right? So I'm going to put this on, and let's go ahead and use the serger. We're already here. Let's do it. I'm going to put it under the needle. So remember, I'm starting with the fabric under the needle. That gives the serger the best opportunity to get going. And I am making sure, look at that zipper pull. I don't want that to get caught underneath anything. The last thing you want is anything metal underneath there. Oh, don't want that at all. Here's my line. Now, ordinarily when you're sewing, this is something important to note on a serger. Ordinarily when you're sewing, your needle is right in the middle of your presser foot. So if you're used to doing that, it's kind of like a little brain game to stop and notice where your needle is so that you're positioned correctly for the seam that you want to make. So my needle's a little bit further to the left. I want my seam to be about 1/4 of an inch. I have a little bit of wiggle room built in for myself there, but I still want to keep as close as possible to the pattern. But then I'm going to go ahead and just stitch through those layers, securing the flap on this edge. Whoops, I bumped the presser foot. Okay, it is down. We are down. Oh, it thinks we're not down. Okay. Let's give it a little bit more pressure. No, this may be too much. No, there it goes. Nope, it's too much. So, and I'm going to open it up, pull off backwards. Okay. So I'm going to clear those stitch fingers. And right where there, it told me that it was not able to get all of this compressed. So that's okay. I'm going to go over to the sewing machine and do it over there. And I want to do the top stitching on this one, on this little flap though first. So let's go ahead and do that because I want that to match. All right. There's just things you learn and you don't know until you try. So let's get some top stitching going over here so that this one is the same. And we'll just really quickly get that closed together. Go around the edges. The nice thing is when you can set this machine so your needle just stops at a needle down, just like you can with your sewing machine. And then you can make nice pivots when you just barely raise your presser foot and you haven't altered the stitches at all. So you don't have like a gap or a bubble or a skip stitch at those corners. You can just keep going. Nice pivots, beautiful stitching. All right, here we go. So there's our top stitched little flap. Let's take these over to the sewing machine and let's finish this over there. Okay, here we are. Right over here. We're going to finish this first side. Okay. And we're going to lift up. See, I've got to give it, even on my sewing machine, I have to give it a little bit of extra lift because this is thick. There's a lot going on here. And so I'm going to give my machine the best opportunity it can. I'm even going to increase my stitch length a little bit so that I don't have to put so many stitches in this area. If you feel like your machine is having a hard time, then you might want to use your hand wheel to make those stitches happen instead of your foot pedal. Okay, so there's my seam. What I'm going to do is wrap it around and then do a top stitch across there. Okay, so let's cover that up. Now I did hear my machine kind of balk a little bit. Remember, we're using the Quilting Cuddle, so we're doing something a little bit extra for the fabric. So I'm paying attention to what happens, how my machine feels, and I'm not going to stress it more than it, can handle. I did notice that because I had an 80-12 needle in the machine before I was doing this project yesterday, that I broke a needle. And then when I paid attention to that, I realized that I should have put in the 9014 stretch needle because I'm using Cuddle fabric. And so even those that do it, of us that do it all the time, we forget to. It's okay. We have an opportunity to correct. Okay, so there's my top stitching on that piece, and that wraps around and it covers up that raw edge, right? So now all I need to do is I need to tack this part down here to cover that seam, and that's done. I have some cuddle dust on there. I can get that off too. Let's put this other side on, and again, I'm thinking about the way I want my top stitching to show up. So I'm going to lay this down here like this. Okay, so I'm lining it all up. I'm going to stitch this down. And I feel my machine, you know, it's like, you're going through a lot here. I'm like, yeah, we're going through a lot. So I'm going slow. I'm not speeding through. This isn't a race, and you don't get extra points for going faster than you need to. I am going to make sure that I've got that zipper pull out of the way. Did you see that? Now I've got to do a little bit of origami and keep this flat as I can while I'm top stitching this down around that edge. So let's do that, and let's keep everything as flat as we can. You know what I'm going to do to help me control it? I'm going to use some clips. When in doubt, use some clips, use your pins. Give yourself all the opportunity to get things right. You might want to use the jumbo Wonder clips right there. It's very thick. But no, I think we're going to be fine. I think we're going to be fine with those clips. Okay, and I'm going to just, again, making sure that I catch that raw edge inside this fold. Unless this is it, the last seam, guys. Well, besides that little bit of hand stitching. But those little flaps are so clever, and they really do add something fun to the edges of the bag. So let's get rid of all those threads. I could clean those up a little bit better later. And then I would just hand sew those down right here. I have a little bit of cuddle that I want to trim right here by the zipper. Are you ready to flip it? Let's flip it right side out. Let's pretend that we have sewn these flaps down, okay, to conceal those raw edges. Let's pretend that. And here we go. Our bag is done. Ta-da! So fun. Look, and y'all, if I hadn't been talking, we would have been done probably an hour ago. So fast, so easy, so cute. Okay, let me flip the camera because I want to talk to you guys, and I want to make sure that I see. Oh, Teresa, it is freaking adorable, isn't it? All right, let's see. Here I am. Ha! All right, we made it. Here's our bag. Here's, full view. It's little bitty, super cute. And I have these extra elements that I just absolutely love. I love the Serger quilting. Love it. I cannot tell you how happy it makes me. I love the way the quilting cuddle feels in your hand. To have a bag made out of cuddle is just such a fun experience. And so we use the soft and stable interfacing. And so you can see, like, I'm kind of pushing on it. It's nice and stable. It's a very good, cute bag. It's very functional. It doesn't, oh, I didn't switch it. Hold on. There I am. Oh my goodness. Thank you. Thank you, Gianna, for pointing that out. Here we are. Okay, start over. Here's a little bag. Super cute. Nice and structured. Here's my Serger quilting. I've got the soft and stable in it. It's just a quality bag, y'all. This is not one of those little giveaway bags that you forget about. This is a bag you will keep and use for a very long time, especially if you make it out of Quilting Cuddle. It's so fun. Look at the back. So here's the bottom. There's my center line, right? Here's my quilting lines that give it some structure and some support. You could add all the stitching you want to. I felt like this fabric stands on its own, and I didn't want to cover it with a whole lot of stitching, but you absolutely can add as much stitching as you like. This one, when I finish it, will have a lot more stitching on it. There's no wrong answer. It's just fun. So if you've got a serger, if you got the Bernina L890, play with that stitch. Play with the 2-thread chain stitch. I used the left needle. It was stitch number 33. Okay. The only thing I did different is I adjusted my stitch length to about 3.3, made it a little bit longer so that this little chain stitch is a little bit chunkier. The longer stitches, the thread has more opportunity to kind of do its thing. And that bulky thread, oh, so good. So good. Yeah. Oh my gosh, Debbie, if you haven't done it yet, it's really great. Grab that book, the Bernina Big Book of Serging. It has so many great projects that as you work through the projects, you'll become comfortable using the quilting functions of the serger in no time at all. Let's see. Anything else? Oh, yeah. Holly. Yeah, you do need a serger. You need this Bernina L890. contact your local Bernita dealer on how to get one. Let's see. Did you like and share the video? I hope you did, because it's time to pick some winners. Let's see. Adriana, if you could pick some winners for us and then pop those up on the screen. Let me see if I can see our screen. That is what I need to see so I can tell. There we go. Here's our winners. Bruce. Oh, we got 3 winners. This is so great. Bruce Bolton, Louise Potter Shirey, and Shauna Weidman. Email us. If you'll send us an email to info@ShannonFabrics with your name and your shipping info and your phone number, put in the subject line live winner, and we will get you taken care of. Remember, I said the Quilting Cuddle isn't here yet. We have been playing with sample fabrics, with the the testing pieces. So as it's being developed, they send pieces of it over to make sure for quality control. So we've been playing with that. And so it's coming though. It's on its way and it'll be here shortly. Customer service will take care of you and make sure you get those fat quarter bundles. But y'all are going to love working with it. Ask for your quilt store to start carrying it and tell them to get on the Shannon Fabrics website, contact their sales rep and ask about it, because this is special stuff and it's super fun. Thank you for spending some time with me. I had a ball making another one of these. I got these other ones cut out, so hopefully by the end of the day, I'll have those finished up as well. Please leave your questions if you have any more questions, and we'll make sure that we go back through and check all of those. But we are just thrilled that you spent some time with us. So thank you for hanging out with us. And thank you for being part of the Shannon Fabrics community. If you're not in the I Love Cuddle Facebook group, let me invite you to come join us, because not only do we do little projects like this, we do big projects, we do quilts, we do blankets, we do all kinds of things with Quilting Cuddle, and we'd love to have you along for the ride with us. It's a fun community full of really inspiring things, and we would love to see you all there. Again, thank you again. I can't thank you enough. Be sure to tune in next week, because Ajer Perello and I will be back with another cuddle conversation, and we'll be answering all of your questions about cloud, cuddle, and serging. So we had a couple of questions about serging at the last cuddle conversation, but we're going to show you some fun stuff. So be sure to check it out. Same time, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram will be there, and leave your questions if you have any about cloud cuddle already. But it'll be a fun time, and we'll see you then. Thanks for joining me. Happy sewing.